It's time to install the cellulose insulation. Really not looking forward to it, although the irregularity of this space means it would be difficult to even put fiberglass in, probably. But also probably less difficult, especially the ceilings. Now, I watched a video on installing cellulose in new construction, and they use some kind of fabric mesh. Naturally, I went to the hardware store and no such mesh existed. That's just typical, though. For whatever reason, hardware stores seem to lack really bare essentials for new construction, like borate-treated cardboard for barrier, or in this case, this fabric mesh. So, my plan is to cover everything with rosin paper. And I know that's not completely ideal, and if I was using drywall, I probably wouldn't sweat it so much, but you can't really repair plywood after you cut it. I mean, you can put a big ugly patch on it, but that's about it. It's been quite an adventure, very frustrating the last few days. These boards you would think had been out for years. They grew fuzzy mold all over them. Just completely disgusting. So these were supposed to be the inside walls of the well house. They've been out under a tarp for, I don't know, maybe 3 weeks, possibly as much as 4. I went to Lowe's yesterday and picked up this purple drywall stuff. I'm not really a big fan of drywall, but in this case, one of my objectives is to try to seal, create a vapor barrier on the inside, and it would have been a tall order with that plywood anyway. That's only half the story of all the frustration, though. The other half... Oh boy. That's new. Not great at all. Yeah, so I've been struggling with the cellulose insulation. I'm really disappointed that fell down. That must have happened during the night. Thought it would hold for a day. Anyway, so I kind of overpacked this stuff a little bit, and that was on purpose, because it's going to settle over time. Just pack this back in and staple it up before that. Have most of the walls drywall up. Alright, I have all of this drywalled finally. It's surprisingly homey once you add drywall. I don't think it would have been this homey if I had used plywood instead. And this stuff also just lets you get away with a lot more, which is good, because it's all a little funny. That's what happens when you use a bunch of milled boards. As my pottery teacher once said, you don't have to add any imperfection, there's enough imperfection built in. And that is more universally true than just pottery. Alright, I put all the insulation in here. I have this rosin paper here because I thought for sure I would need to secure it. However, it seems to be holding itself in place just fine. So, never actually done a cathedral ceiling insulation job like this before, so just wasn't sure. Seems to grip fine. I was also a little worried that the spacing might be off because, this wood is home milled and it's kind of funky. So it's a little bit tricky to build with. This was so much easier than cellulose. Just so much easier. I actually rolled the vapor barrier around so that it wouldn't vent through that soffit. I know that I have vented soffit, but that's because that's what I ordered for a different project, and then I used it for this. So it doesn't really need to be vented. Non-venting makes me nervous, definitely, but as far as thermal efficiency, it's much better. Now this is actually close enough that I just jammed a couple R13s in, which are made for 2x4 studs. So it's, you know, theoretically there should be a little bit of a gap in the middle, but I'm not seeing it. So I think it's puffed out enough. Also gave it plenty on the edges. So I'm pretty much trying to prevent air movement. You need about 50 millimeters for effective convection. Otherwise, air itself is a decent insulator. The weird part is the drywall, which I should have potentially used cement board, but I think I'll have an easier time getting a good seal. Hoping to get an airtight seal, essentially, using plaster. So that's the reason for that. And like I said, this stuff is mold and mildew resistant. Now, which side should be pointed inward or outward, I have no idea. So more disappointment with the cellulose. It definitely settled an inch or two in a lot of areas, and the reason that's particularly disappointing is that I was packing it in quite a bit, and it still managed to settle that much. I get the feeling all these people who have videos of just air blowing in the cavities of their walls don't realize that probably in a couple months you're going to lose maybe 4 inches or something ridiculous. I mean, it just does not work. The only thing that kind of works is hand packing it, and like I said, I'm pretty sure it'll settle even then. The whole thing seems like a bit of a sham. Added a 1 1/4 strip up on top. I'll tape around that. And I've been using this fiberglass product here. I've been pretty impressed with it. It's pretty seamless. Let's see, it's called Fiber Fuse. I got this from Lowe's. I just finished plastering all of this with the initial layer, finally. I had to use a lot of plaster. I used about 25 pounds. Which is actually probably not that outlandish, really. I had to fill in some pretty big gaps, and you can imagine I used quite a bit at that top peak area. So that was a lot of it. I also had all of the holes along the top area that I had to fill in. And I also just tightened up all the gaps around everything else. So I've done 2 layers of plaster. Have all the fiberglass strips reinforcing the seams. And I just cleaned up the floors and cut off the initial posts that were holding the old well house. There we go. Just sanded everything. I think it took an hour and a half or so. This is not snow. It's just plaster. Holy crap, was there a lot to sand. So this has been a complete waste of time. I put a good hour of effort trying to get this fucking sprayer from Harbor Freight to work. It's even designed for latex, I believe. And no matter what I do, I mean, I even modded this so that it would pressurize the tank itself and force the paint in. And it still just is inconsistent and shit. I can get a good run, and by a good run I mean massive splotches. You know, like if you look at this, I don't know if the camera will pick it up, but it's like dripping down. It's just this unpredictable pile of crap. I just finished the first coat. The coverage is so-so, but this is not a primer. You might be wondering why I didn't use a primer or an exterior paint. It's because I got this pretty high-end 5-gallon container of paint for $40, and it's by Valspar. So, pretty decent deal. And I figure I'll just, you know, glop it up. Here we go, 2 coats of paint. And unfortunately, I think I'm going to need a 3rd coat just to cover some of the blotchiness that's still here. This is the 3rd coat of paint completed. It's actually so bright in here it's disorienting, and the bugs are kind of going nuts for it. Keep getting all these bugs flying in and landing on the paint and getting stuck.